Okay, so I think we're going to get started for the evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for attending tonight's public meeting. This is by the Climate Action Task Force and the Department of Community and Economic Development's Planning Division. My name is Elijah Romulus. I'm the town planner. So since June of last year, myself and the rest of the team have been working on a draft of the Climate Action, Resilience, and Sustainability Plan, or the CRS plan for short. I'll be going into more details later, and I'm excited to be here tonight with all of you to go over it. We have a few presentations in line for you, so consider this a listening session of sorts with time for a brief Q&A after each presentation. So I'm a Tufts alum myself, and I have had the privilege of partnering with my alma mater on this plan for the CRS plan. We are joined tonight by a team of graduate students from the Urban and Environmental Policy and Planning Program, also known as UEP. These individuals have been working diligently, researching and drafting and preparing an exploratory report that will look into the possibilities of microgrids in Westwood, and they'll be sharing some of their findings. Just a note that they are still in the process of putting the report together, but are happy to share some of what they have so far. So when I had told some of my colleagues that I was doing this project, I got some hesitant applaud for this tall order. Many times this kind of project is contracted out to a team of consultants to complete, but I appreciate Nora's confidence in me raising to the occasion. And I also have to say I would not have been able to complete this without the help of our housing land use planner, Amanda Wolf. And then also a big thank you to the Climate Action Task Force, which I convened to advise in this process from deciding on our slogan, Westwood, a better, brighter future. Also, providing data, different reports and town plans. Everyone's kind of come together on this task force to play a role in shaping the project. April is Earth Month, and I thought it was fitting, and thankfully the project timeline allowed for this meeting to take place during the month. There is an indigenous proverb that states, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So we all have a part to play in giving Westwood a better, brighter future, and this CRS plan will help in doing that. So in the back, we do have some snacks. If you'd like some, help yourself. There's a sign-in sheet for anyone who is kind of new into this process. If you'd like to jot down your email, I can always send out some information as we go forward. Without further ado, I would like to bring up the Tufts UEP Field Projects team to share their presentation. Thank you.
Am I near the present button?
Hi everybody. Thank you for your time and attention this evening. We're excited to be here and share our project with you. As Elijah said, we are graduate students from Tufts University's Department of Urban and Environmental Policy and Planning. My name is Colleen. I'm a first-year Environmental Policy and Planning student.
Hi, my name is Hani. I'm a first-year MS in Sustainability student.
Hi, I'm Sarah, first-year student in MS Environmental Policy and Planning.
And I'm Joe. I'm a second year in the MA for Urban and Environmental Planning.
And together we spent the past few months considering microgrids to give Westwood a better, brighter future. And this evening we will introduce you to what microgrids are and explain how they could enhance the town's climate resilience efforts. From here we will outline our key research questions and methods that we employed to explore microgrids. We'll offer some preliminary findings and conclude with some benefits challenges and opportunities to consider should Westwood decide to pursue a similar project. This project is partnered with the Town of Westwood Planning Division, specifically the Department of Community and Economic Development. You may recognize these people joining us in this photo here. Elijah and Amanda entrusted us with this project that's largely exploratory and research-based. But before getting into the contents of what that report contains, we wanted to define microgrids, give an overview of how they work, what their advantages are. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
Now, as Colin said, we want to have a very brief overview of what a microgrid is. Microgrid is a local energy system that generates and stores its own energy. And, it's a local, can you hear me right now? Yeah. It's a local energy system that generates and stores its own energy, and it can also operate independently from the larger power grid or in collaboration with it. Next slide, please. Here you can see the main components of a microgrid. The first part is electricity generation. They are actually what produce energy for a microgrid, like solar panels and wind turbines. The second part is a very key piece of a microgrid, which is energy storage, mainly batteries. They actually stores extra electricity from sources like solar panels and release it as needed to meet load demand once the main generation assets are not active. And the third part is microgrid controller. The controller actually link energy sources to users, to storage, and to the main grid. And it actually provides services like voltage support and managing the power flow between the main grid and the microgrid. And the fourth part, which is a very important part of a microgrid, it is like the brain of a microgrid. It is load management resources, and it balances how much energy is used and needed, and can supply match to demand. So it manages the process of storing energy during low demand times. Next slide. We can say that microgrids can be defined with three characteristics and advantages. They are local because they provide local energy and generate power for nearby customers. And we can also say they are independent. As we mentioned before, they work independently of the central microgrid and can actually provide backup power for critical facilities during power outages. They are intelligent because they manage batteries and storage, and they can manage the batteries and storage and also help the process to store electricity in low prices, and also meet the clean energy goals. Now I pass it off to Joe for the next slide.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Now we just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about why we got here. Why is Westwood considering microgrids? So I think a lot of the people in this room might be familiar with some of this work, but Westwood has done a good amount of work that has kind of led to this point. Beginning in 2020 with the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan. This is a plan that originated from a grant that was given for planning purposes, and it led to kind of a community-led process to identify certain risks specifically related to climate change, as well as starting to develop some initiatives to address those risks. And so this picture that we have here is one of some of the community resilience workshops that were done as part of this process. A following plan is the hazard mitigation plan, which is a more detailed inventory of the risks that the town sees relative to climate change. And so these two plans, kind of in combination with the larger comprehensive plan, identified a number of risks, whether it be flooding from extreme storms or heat waves or things of the nature, or the beaver infestation. But ultimately, one of the big risks that were identified was power outages, and their risks, especially for in a power outage situation, losing heating, losing cooling, losing air conditioning, and also losing the ability to power medical devices or other critical equipment that you might need. So that has led Westwood, as part of the CRS plan, to ask us to investigate microgrids. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So to talk a little bit about our project scope, some of the concrete deliverables that we've been asked to provide as part of this project include this exploratory report that Elijah was talking about. So this gives an overview of what microgrids are, and it investigates existing examples of microgrids that have been or are being developed in Massachusetts. And finally, it kind of translates all that information into concrete recommendations that we make to the town of Westwood for how they could implement such a microgrid. And as we've been going through this research process, this kind of central question has emerged as the one that we've been focused on. So how can a microgrid bring resilience to the town of Westwood? To respond to this central question and to kind of go throughout this research process, we've been very focused on these existing examples of microgrids. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. They're a quasi-governmental agency that has provided a lot of grant money in the last few years to a number of municipalities and other institutions in Massachusetts to develop these feasibility assessments. And so a lot of our work has focused around reading through these, gathering information from them to see how these different municipalities specifically are considering a microgrid, and how some of these considerations might be applied to Westwood. And so as we went through this process, we're thinking based on the kind of the information that we received from Elijah and Amanda of some of these guiding criteria that would help us think about, what might Westwood look for in a microgrid. And so they include things that are kind of obvious, like resilience. So in this case, it means the ability for a microgrid to provide continuous and reliable power, to be able to prioritize high-risk areas, populations, and critical services, kind of in line with the town's larger climate and energy efficiency goals, to be able to have a microgrid that would include sustainable and energy efficient generation and storage equipment, to provide savings and revenue options to the community, to the different stakeholders involved. So that might take the form of utility savings from more renewable energy being provided, and can have some other financial benefits. And then lastly, kind of a point of importance that we understood the town is interested in is seeking a variety of funding sources with this sort of specific goal of reducing upfront costs, because as you'll see, microgrids have some pretty significant upfront costs. So go to the next one. And then kind of getting a little bit more into the bones of our research, this kind of shows a sort of a map of how we're getting to these recommendations, but we've started with a number of research methods that are kind of how we're doing the work. They help us answer a number of research questions that are kind of implicit in the earlier question that I was talking about, the sort of resilience question, and then they lead into these kind of specific recommendations. So just to give you a broad overview, the literature review portion is an investigation of existing literature around climate risks, specifically climate risks that cause power outages, and how microgrids kind of generally can provide a solution to this. The case example and the stakeholder interviews are really focused around these existing cases that I was talking about. So looking at towns that have already implemented a microgrid or are in the process of implementing a microgrid. And that kind of answers the question of, well, how do you put a microgrid in place? How do you fund it concretely? How do you design it? How do you manage regulatory barriers? And then finally, a piece of the research is a GIS analysis, which is a kind of a spatial addition that helps us answer the question where. If we are going to consider a microgrid for the town, where's the best place to locate it given environmental and physical constraints? And with that, I'll pass it back to Colleen.
So as Joe mentioned, we utilized a case example approach to consider how existing microgrid feasibility assessments could inform implementation in Westwood. And one of the 4 cases we looked at was the town of Hull, which is located on a peninsula in South Boston Harbor. And Hull's population is slightly smaller than Westwood's at about 10,000. However, it shares very similar risks to high wind speeds and flooding in the event of extreme weather events that make a microgrid a viable alternative to the existing grid structure, should Westwood decide to pursue that route. And later on in the presentation, I'll elaborate more on what we were able to tease out of this report regarding some of the constraints, benefits, and opportunities that Westwood could be mindful of going forward. With that, I'll pass it to Honey to talk about our interview process.
Hi, as Joe mentioned, we did the stakeholder interview. We have successfully completed the process of the interviews, but we are still analyzing the interviews, and those interviews are going to help us answer this question, like what are the regulatory, technical, and economic challenges and benefits of microgrids. Some of the interview we did was with the municipal staff, town committee, energy consultants, and critical facilities funding organization to help us analyze the process of like how microgrid can microgrid be suitable for Westwood. This is the GIS vulnerability analysis that we did. This was to analyze what location best suits the microgrids. Campus 1 and Campus 2 were recommended by our project partners. Campus 1 has the library, fire station, town hall, police station, and the Deerfield Elementary School. And Campus 2 has the Westwood High School, Council on Aging, and Trust Middle School. High School and Council on Aging provide the overnight emergency shelter. So in the later on presentation, we'll discuss what environmental hazards we looked into in this spatial analysis. With that, I'll pass it to Colleen.
Thanks, Honey. So we now just want to turn to some of the preliminary findings that we're finding in response to these research questions we just posed. The first being what we can learn from existing feasibility assessments such as Hull's. So Hull's report did present high upfront costs associated with implementing a microgrid. However, an accompanying financial analysis projected several revenue opportunities post-implementation. The whole case saw reductions in energy capacity and transmissions costs. Something to note here, though, is that Hull stated at the time it released this report that it planned to self-own, finance, and operate the microgrid. So should Westwood take steps to consider a similar project, it would need to weigh the economic costs and benefits associated with this project to get a sense of what its financial capacity is to see a project like this through. And one thing we'll talk about later are some funding opportunities and some incentives that exist in the state of Massachusetts. But on the environmental side, resilience and sustainability were among the main benefits under Hull's model. There was an environmental impact analysis that assessed greenhouse gas emissions in a pre- and post-microgrid scenario, finding significant cuts in carbon and sulfur dioxide in the post scenario. And this suggests an opportunity that a microgrid could play in Westwood, particularly in translating some of the goals that are outlined in the CRS plan and transferring Westwood off of reliance on fossil fuels and integrating more clean, renewable alternatives And even beyond the environmental benefits, the whole case demonstrated multiple avenues for economic development with the microgrid. Microgrids can democratize energy production, which essentially means that they can stimulate local economies. And the whole case projected that they could lower energy costs, encourage local entrepreneurship, increase the overall asset value of a building or facility that a microgrid is serving, and could also boost job opportunities in a rapidly growing green energy sector, jobs related to building and maintaining the grid. So overall, opportunities to enhance economic development through microgrids. And finally, Hull identified the town hall, the Department of Public Works garage in the Atlantic Courthouse, which is a facility for senior citizens, as the proposed microgrid campus. And the locations proposed to us in this project that Honey talked about a little earlier are very similar to the ones in this whole case. There's the town hall, council on aging, fire and police stations, all of which serve very similar functions to the ones that Hull identified. And the rationale behind Hull's site selection centered around maintaining the continuity of critical facilities in the event of disaster, in addition to protecting populations for which an evacuation might be more difficult. And we found a pattern in this case example and some of the others that we looked at, emphasizing that very intention to promote resilience in an area that may be more high risk to disaster and also of great community value in the event that disaster does strike. But on that note, I want to pass it to Honey to talk a little bit more about those sites that we're looking at in Westwood.
Thank you, Colleen. So these were the two vulnerability analysis we did. We looked at the environmental hazard. This is the flood map. And as you can see, the red one is campus 1 and this is campus 2. Both of the campuses are a bit far from the flood zone, so flood is not a concern for these two campuses. And also this is the wind map, and the wind speed is also not too high. It's in a lower range, so it's not a major concern for power outages. So looking at the GIS analysis, we can conclude that flood and wind were not much of a concern for these two campuses, and it won't affect the implementation of microgrids. We would like to talk about some of the preliminary considerations. First one is location selection. It is very important for a microgrid to be implemented where there are existing utilities, for example, the solar canopies that are going to be installed in the high school. It's going to help with the operation and it's going to make the process feasible for operation and implementation of microgrids. For community engagement, I would like to pass it to Sarah.
To ensure that the outcomes of microgrid implementation are aligned with Westwood's public need, interests, and priorities optimally, it is crucial to consider completing a community engagement process. Drawing from engagement processes from those in hazard mitigation plan or the MVP program. In our recommendation, we consider employing methods like surveys, workshops, and informative sessions to gather insights and information from people to understand how best to implement a microgrid. And this includes determining the sites and population of highest priority in the event of a disaster, and also extracting insight from residents and assessing their concerns about this project to identify and prepare for potential challenges that may happen. And this process can help to ensure that this project reflect the community's needs and perspective. Now I pass it up to Colleen.
Similar to what we saw in the whole example, conducting a financial analysis or business model could offer better insight into Westwood's capacity to carry out this project financially, especially if cost efficiency and revenue are among some of the main desired priority outcomes from pursuing a project like this. there are some funding sources and incentives that may be useful. Mass CEC being one of them has been a known funder for feasibility assessments. The MVP program also offers funding for feasibility assessments, and in some cases can also offer funding for the grid equipment that Sarah walked us through a little bit earlier. And the IRA also offers a tax credit of 30% for battery installation. So ultimately, there are avenues to finance a project like this. Despite the high upfront costs associated with it, there are avenues to go about it through funding and incentives.
And just on the regulatory front, something that we found from some of our case example review and our stakeholder interviews was that a common issue that a lot of these towns doing these feasibility assessments were encountering was utility franchise rights. So in a lot of these examples, a lot of the microgrids are conceived as multiple buildings being connected together in a kind of a neighborhood-like grid. However, we discovered that utilities like Eversource or National Grid have this sort of quasi-total sort of right over rights of way, or any sort of utility connections that go through right of way. And so a lot of these feasibility assessments found it very hard just going into the regulatory process and in the permitting process to overcome that barrier. So one thing that would be a preliminary recommendation, again, these are very preliminary, but some of the towns have been considering what they call a virtual microgrid. So instead of having the different parts of the microgrid interconnected across the rights of way, each separate building would have its own connection to the grid, and the thing that would link them is sort of the technology equipment, the microgrid controller that Sarah was referring to, which basically allows all these different parts of the microgrid to switch on or switch off at the same time. So, yeah, with that.
Just want to thank Elijah and Amanda who've advised us on this project for the past few months. And also give a quick shout out to our teaching team at Tufts who might be watching this live, we're not certain. But thank you for all of your attention, and yeah, open to questions or any feedback.
So we're going to have to use the microphones.
Oh, actually the stand.
Oh, you are.
Thank you. So this is interesting, but I have I don't think I fully comprehend it, and I have some tiny knowledge about what microgrids are. So does it entirely rely on renewable energy, and in which case we would need to install more? That's one question. And is this focused mostly on municipal facilities, or are we talking about residential and commercial as well?
So I can answer the second question. It is focused on municipal facilities.
Oh, okay.
And for the first part, no, it's not just renewables. There are microgrids. Some of the cases that we've been looking at are considering combined heat and power, which is kind of a gas reliant system, and then some of the generators that they use for backup power. In some cases, they consider those to be the sort of storage element of the microgrid, and they'll have diesel, but in light of Westwood's climate and energy goals, we're kind of looking to see to what extent the renewable systems could be implemented, but feasibly it might be a combination.
And I have one more question, probably for Elijah. Is Tom Philbin involved with all this?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's been involved from the onset, and he is one of the stakeholders that they interviewed.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so don't you want local residential? Wouldn't it be most effective when you get a whole section of a town on a microgrid So that includes certainly residential and business, or one or the other, or both. And when you do that, how do you get people to participate? For example, if you wanted to do a residential area, you might want to encourage more solar panels on the homes that are most adaptable to it. And so that, people that have a house that's not oriented right or has a lot of trees around it, they can get the benefit of that, and everyone can get overall the benefits of doing that. But how do you bring everyone together to do something like that?
I think one of the considerations related to that high school campus, in addition to one of the considerations we were exploring in relation to one of the campuses, namely the high school campus, in addition to the existing energy generation sources that could be available with the solar canopies, is that that campus is very close to a residential area, so there could be potential to power those homes in the event of a power outage. And I know, as Sarah was talking about, one of the things we were recommending was a more in-depth community engagement process specifically related to what kind of priority is designated to the two campuses proposed to us, because we're coming from the policy and planning side, and we want to recognize that we're not from this community, and we wanted to make space for residents and business owners to make those decisions and think about specifically the site selection question. What would be more valuable to the people that live here and would be affected by these disaster events?
Also, just to add to that, the actual scope of the project related specifically to municipal campuses. So, maybe later down the road, we could consider residential as well.
And I think that's kind of in line with what we've been seeing in the feasibility assessments that are existing, is that a lot of towns in this kind of iteration of considering microgrids, they're specifically looking at these sort of town facilities that provide critical services. So.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to learn about this kind of stuff. And anything I say, I don't mean to criticize at all. I'm just here to learn about stuff. So the question that I had coming in before was, I was wondering what the risk to the microgrid itself was from climate things like flooding or wind and that kind of thing. You answered that nicely. The microgrid, as I understand it, is consolidated at sort of like to these two campuses, which are near the town hall and the high school. So, and I presume that the generation that's going to be used is also going to be co-located there. So, if we're in any other model, it would be hard. I think the risk to the microgrid itself would be if you were trying to bring power into the microgrid, into the storage area from around the town, from sources that are located around the town. That would be then the conduit of those things, because they're new, first of all, and then secondly, because they might be exposed to wind and water and that kind of stuff. That would be hard to do. So that's a good thing. But the other question that I have is I guess then you have these facilities in the municipal areas, and their thing. I guess it's excluding medical areas, because we don't have any medical areas there, right? So that's a problem. So that means that anybody else is pretty much on their own. In other words, anybody else in the town that doesn't either has to provide the power themselves, or because they can't, unless they leave their homes, they can't look to the microgrid to help, because it's centrally located for these risk reasons, as well as other things. And so, it's good that it's there, but it leaves a whole bunch of people out. In our case, and some other cases I know of, some of us are lucky enough to basically we have solar panels ourselves, but there are parts of the town that are located among marshes and things, and it'd be. I've always been interested in finding out what they would look like if there was a lot of water. You know, I know in Newton they had a case where they had to actually look at insurance policies in order to find out how much flooding there was for places. But that would be something to consider, because who exactly are going to be the people who are going to be served and so forth, and how are they going to be served? You know, and also the other question is, what's the longevity? In other words, how long will the town be down because of a major storm or something like that?
So I can jump in if. So really, with this project, I'm kidding. Yeah, thank you. So with this project, we were really looking at the, the town facilities, and then these would be like a last resort in terms of, a heating or a cooling center. If there was a natural disaster and the heating and cooling centers that are designated don't even have power, then the microgrid would be like that kind of answer to kick in addition to generators.
I can add, so the high school is the official location in the event of a disaster if we ever needed to set up cots and shelter. And then the library is informally that too. So the idea was, yes, we can't access every resident, but there's a place where they can go, and also fire and police still have power so they can respond and go out to everyone.
Also, just to add on that, microgrids also help with load management on the main power grid. So they kind of manage the load like on the main power grid, and it helps like regular electricity supply. I think in the case, another case study that we saw for Chelsea, like they are in the process of microgrid, and they have it a virtual microgrid. And that's like helping them to manage the load that's on the main grid that they have.
So we'll close out with this last question.
On a technical perspective, what would this look like physically? Like, are we talking like one large battery per campus? Are we talking an assortment of batteries? Because I'm sure each of those municipal buildings are separately metered. So would there be like a single battery that each one is additionally tied into?
So we are, I guess, still in process of concluding and coming to findings, but some town facilities may share a meter, but most of them are on their own separate meter, and then batteries are usually used for specific building loads.
So they would be separate, and the microgrid would more be the fact that it's all tied in behind the controls.
Yeah.
And then each one would be separate. Okay. Is there a reason it would be the microgrid instead of just having a bunch of batteries and monitoring them separately?
It's a good question. I guess.
That's okay.
In terms of generation, batteries only store, right? Does the microgrid also generate?
Depending on the connection.
Yeah, it's a combination. We're getting starting to get above our pay grade, but
Microphone.
oh, thanks. Yeah, I think the examples that we've seen tend to be kind of a combination of things. So the storage piece really comes in as one of the resilience pieces of the microgrid. It just has that and kind of like a generator, strictly speaking, would kind of come in, kick in those in those power outage events where you would just need to have that energy on hand. But in combination with the generation on site, they allow you to have a little bit more control over your buildings, your microgrids management. So there is this resilience component physically, but combined with some of these other sources, it can kind of multiply benefits to the town. That's probably as far as my brain could take that. But
All All right, so we will conclude this portion of the listening session. So we'll have a chance at the end as well to kind of take some more questions. But just wanted to thank the Tufts team here for coming out and presenting for us. Handled the public process very well, so I appreciate it. No problem. All right, so we're going to take a quick few minute stretch break if you guys need to grab anything or give folks time to exit if they need to. So the next portion of this will be going into the actual plan, and should be about 20 minutes or less in terms of the presentation, and then we could field some questions and comments. Yeah. And encourage everyone to take a quick step up, just get their lungs pumping and the blood flowing. Okay, everyone, going to get back to the next leg of this process. Yeah. All right, so thanks again, everyone, for being here. We're going to start the overview of the CRS plan. Hello, hello. All right, so this is going to be an overview of the project in total. We'll be giving some survey results, showing a draft of the CRS plan, at least as it relates to some recommendations, allow for anyone in the task force that may be here to comment, and then obviously anyone else to comment as well. And then we will end for the evening. Again, this is brought to you by not only the Climate Action Task Force, but the Department of Community and Economic Development, Nora Lognan, Director, myself, Elijah Romulus, Amanda Wolf. We make up the Planning Division, and then our Administrative Assistant, Tiana Malone. Again, for the task force, I had convened together a lot of town staff, different boards, and committee members to help in advising in this process. As I had mentioned, as small as commenting on how we figure out a slogan to providing hard data and analysis to include into the report. Just a thank you to partners and sponsors. Westwood is committed to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate Action and Energy, or GCOM. We just had a presentation by the Tufts UEP program team. And then a shout out to Wegmans that sponsored us for the snacks in the back. So I had asked the original task force in the beginning what they thought about climate action, resiliency, and sustainability. Their biggest thing in terms of comments came back as like energy, resources, efficiency, technology, and future. I know some of you have seen this before, just so for anyone who's watching the recording, just giving you a chance to catch up with what the process is so far. We also posed a similar question during our community visioning sessions. What does climate planning mean to you? A lot of them had responded renewable energy, clean water, recycling, electrification, reducing waste, things of that nature. And then what is at stake? So 2023 set new records for every single climate indicator. The climate crisis is the defining challenge that humanity is facing. It's closely linked to the inequality crisis witnessed by growing food insecurity, population displacement, and biodiversity loss. That is quoted from the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. And just last week, which I'm going to see how could possibly incorporate an action step or a recommendation. Just last week, there was a report from Reuters that was reported on that 57 companies linked to oil, gas, coal, and cement are producing 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions since 2016, 2016 being the year after the historic Paris Climate Agreement. And so, you know, when we're thinking about this, yes, we should lead by example and try to do the best we can, also considering how to put pressure on these 57 polluters. So what does the CRS plan cover? It covers land use and transportation, natural and working lands, so conservation, open space, things of that nature. Sustainable buildings and clean energy use. Resiliency implementation and planning. And water management. So we had done a greenhouse gas inventory in 2017 that showed that there was close to 150,000 megatons megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And so 3% of that was related to municipal facilities and activities. The majority, over 90%, was linked to residential buildings, passenger vehicles, and the industrial industry. So in the plan, we consider how to tackle some of those areas. So what is 150,000 megatons of CO2 equivalent? That would be roughly over 32,000 cars, you know, in their emissions on an annual basis. So we look at our timeline. We started in September. We had some visioning sessions in October and November. Then from the fall into the spring, there was we surveyed the public. We had a draft, we were drafting the plan. And so today we are presenting some of the survey results, parts of the draft plan at this public meeting. And finally in the summer, we will present a finalized version to the planning board in anticipation of an endorsement. So what are some of the guiding principles around this plan? Promoting comprehensive climate action and resilience planning, educating the greater community around climate action, promoting greenhouse gas emissions reductions, promoting clean renewable energy use, and promoting an equitable, clean, and healthy community. Thanks. So some of the goals were town synchronization, so how do boards, committees, and departments work together in climate action, educating the public, looking at transportation improvements such as electrification, supporting electric vehicle infrastructure, you know, looking at an 85% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, looking at potentially a zero waste master plan, continuing the work with the stormwater master plan, improved resiliency, land preservation and rehabilitation, and finally looking at a net zero emissions reduction by 2060. Recognizing that many towns and communities are looking at net zero by 2050, in my consideration, thinking about staff support and capacity, and figuring that maybe 2060 might be more reasonable to reach. If we get there by 2050, that's great, but just figure add a little more time to that. And so presenting a few of the survey results. Again, once we publish the actual draft plan, we'll have more of it there. Who responded? We had over 100 respondents. The majority of them were home-owning residents. A few were renting residents. Some businesses and nonprofits also responded, and then a few that kind of crossed multiple categories. The age of the respondents, a majority were over 56, and a majority of the annual household income was over 100K. Both of those things trend with the census data that's available. So we asked, what level of concern do you have with climate change? And over 2/3 of respondents said that they were very concerned. We asked homeowners in the event of weather-related disasters, were your homes damaged, and over 18% said yes. When we asked some other questions looking into, what happened during a weather event, we said, check all that apply. And the top 3 were power outages lasting more than 1 day, fallen trees, and debris from wind. We then asked, again, with the checking all that apply, what was most concerning to residents in preparing for climate change. Was preparing for the climate impacts, staying warm in extreme cold, and receiving info and alerts. We then also asked folks, what have you done to be more energy efficient? A majority of people said install LED light bulbs, updated their appliances to more energy efficient appliances, and then conducted energy efficiency audits. We also had weatherproofing and upgrading their systems for heating and cooling. We asked folks to expand a little more, comment on what they've done and how they've been successful in climate actions and implementing that in their home and lifestyle. Comments up here, some folks said reduce use of power and water, participate in demonstrations using their civic engagement and protests, and reaching out to the legislators, composting, joining Westwood Community Choice Electricity, owning electric vehicles, educating themselves with literature, and conservation efforts, among some of the comments. So, there are a list of proposed action steps that are associated with this plan. There's about 50 some odd steps. I'm not going to go into all of them. There are some sub-steps as well. But just a brief overview. So as it relates to resiliency planning and implementation, we looked at improving the comprehensive emergency management plan and emergency planning committee, review and improve emergency operations and communication systems, develop a climate change adaptation and resiliency campaign and public education efforts, consolidate clean energy, climate and resiliency plans and programs, continue to leverage state and local resources to demonstrate, net zero solutions and work with surrounding communities to achieve those goals. Update and protect the electric grid. As it relates to land use, we had developed a proactive land use strategy to site housing and clean energy. Enhance zoning bylaws to encourage energy efficiency, stormwater management, and low-impact development. Establish zoning incentives to encourage net zero and LEED development. Digitize meeting packets for committee and board meetings to reduce paper consumption. And promote transit-oriented development in town villages. And this last one kind of ties into transportation as well. For transportation, we had phase out internal combustion vehicles in town, continue fleet electrification and smart charging, address hard to electrify and other modes of transportation. Then we had some action steps related to sustainable buildings and clean energy use. So townwide building energy use and CO2 emissions reduction. So, you know, not only on a municipal level, but looking at our residential housing stock, how can we encourage folks to either, if they haven't gone for an audit, trying to encourage the use of that program, and then figuring out ways to help, you know, reduce the carbon footprint, not only on the municipal side, but residential and commercial. You know, enhancing electric options, electric power options, so renewable energy sources, whether that's solar, or maybe there's the battery backup that was mentioned previously. So those kind of options to be readily available, or at least that information out there for the public. And then evaluate the future of fuels and seek alternatives to fossil. You know, public transportation is out there. How do we try to encourage folks to not rely as much on single, you know, passenger vehicles or that mode of transportation? You know, even just anecdotally, with the pandemic, you know, a lot of people have not gone back into using public transportation after, you know, things that shut down. So how do we start encouraging that kind of use again? And not even anecdotally, that was actually comments on some of the survey questions. And then we also go into natural and working lands. So some of those action steps are identifying, well, so natural and working lands would be open space, conservation, you know, recreation land. So identifying those areas for conservation, codifying the sequestration, emissions, and accounting. So when we have those large swaths of land with trees and different plant species, those are, you know, carbon captures for the emissions that are going out. And so how do we take an accounting of that, seeing how much they actually are, you know, extracting from our emissions in total. Then expanding natural working land conservation, limiting the loss of said lands, and then also looking at how we manage those lands in a changing climate. You know, is it that there's more species that we're thinking about planting to help maintain and for longevity, you know, things of that nature. And finally, water and waste management. Continue the water infrastructure improvements that we're seeing. Continue to develop the stormwater master plan, and then establish a solid waste master plan. So those are a list of the action steps that we have there. In the plan itself, there's a breakdown of some sub-steps that are associated with these, and then kind of explains a little bit on each one as well. So that kind of covers the presentation. We will have a draft coming soon in the next week or so. You can scan the QR code to go to the website. We will be posting it there. And then there were folks that, anyone that signed the sign-in sheet or has been involved and gotten updates regularly throughout this process, I'll be emailing out the plan as well. And in that process, once we post the plan, we'll leave it open for about 30 days for comment, and then we'll get it back, finalize it to present to the planning board. Thank you. So, open for questions and comments.
Hi, thank you very much. Just a comment from someone who has looked at it. You need a lot of trees growing for a long time to take care of 30,000 cars. There's no stand of trees in Westwood that could deal with that. It's just too large. The other thing that, just a comment I had is that, judging by what I've read in the utilities industry and also in the automotive industry, there are plans being made in Westwood and other places for electrifying cars because there are a lot of EVs around. But there also needs to be some imagination used there, because there are people planning to take the power adapters that people use to charge their cars and turn them backwards so that you can power a house using the battery in the car, you know, as it regenerates. And if you imagine a lot of people getting EVs, that's a tremendous storage capability there. If you throw power back at the cars and use them as to help power the town, that's has big large potential.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for consideration. Thank you.
I'll also add that one of the things is also reducing single-person vehicles, because EVs come with their own types of pollution. So because of the car batteries, they're significantly heavier, and so the tires wear and tear much faster, and that leads to microparticles that people can breathe in. So it's still significantly better than greenhouse gas emissions, but you're accepting some level of risk still.
Yes, everything we do has risk. You just have to weigh which one is worse. It's like paper versus plastic, you know. I noticed that you have a zero waste plan and also a solid waste master plan up there. Are those the same?
Yes, they're the same.
Oh, okay, good. And I just wanted to point out there's a very strong link between material consumption and climate change, in case anybody was wondering why that would be in there. So I'm sure that you guys know that, but a lot of 30% of our emissions can be attributed, if not our emissions in Westwood, but globally, are attributed to our consumption of material goods. So it's very, very significant. So thank you for including that.
For sure.
So I would like to challenge you on, why did you say net zero by 2060? The world is set the 2050 date. The nation has set 2050. Certainly the state has set 2050. Even the MBTA is trying to electrify itself by 2040. And so why are we, why aren't we at 2050? So that's, I think that's important consideration. I think that should be changed. There's no sense in
Comprehensive plan said 2050, didn't it?
I mean, well, yeah, probably says that. So I think, yeah, we need to go to the 2050. So the other thing that I've been emphasizing quite a bit is education, and that's public education, not school education. Though I'm not, I don't know. I don't have any children in school, so I don't know how much they're learning on all of this. Hopefully they are, but we can't rely. Even if they were, we can't rely upon them to educate the parents. I think, and as I read in there, you know, you want to convince the people of the urgency of climate change, but I don't think that's what we need to do, because I think most people realize the urgency of climate change. Most people know they want that something, lots of things need to be done, and the problem is they're not really sure what all the things they can do. They think, oh, I know I can do this, I can do this, but there are just so many things that could be done, and we really need to get that word out to everyone. So I think I don't know how much you can include in this, but at some point we have to get an education campaign out there where one by one you go through all the things you can do, reducing your water use, your electric use, your use of, just the number of things you buy and that you don't really need. It just goes on, and I just, every time I mention a few things to people, then I remember, oh, there's some more things that we can mention. So getting a real list together of everything to start to disseminate it to people would be a big part of this.
So that is the purpose of this plan in part. And so with this process of having public meetings, this plan that we have, the draft, is a relatively large document, but I'm also going to be consolidating it down into an executive summary that's about 9 pages or so that can be read for and I'll be leaving it around for folks to view. Then also creating like a one-pager that does have that information, and then also we to your point, considering other ways in the future to keep this moving, having more material for folks to be able to rely on. Even with the DPW, they've been kind of pushing with the recycling effort and trying to figure out how folks can recycle correctly. So that's one example of public education. But also even in the schools, looking at maybe like some sustainability factors that can be incorporated into potential curriculum, or maybe it's like during Earth Month, there's different activities. So considering some of these things as we move forward.
And I'll also add, while we were going through the draft, we realized education played into every single step. And so that's something we've been adding in and working with like WMC on PSAs, and also offering information about incentives and making sure that these going green is equitable and accessible to all.
Thank you so much for all the work that you've done on this. There's a number of us from WEAC here tonight, and I just wanted to ask, how we can help you. So, are there certain initiatives that our committee can help with, or any thoughts on that?
We're already helping Dad with the document.
Okay.
Yes, so WEAC has been very helpful in this process, and so I guess getting the information out once the plan is together. Like I said, I'll also have a condensed version of the plan because, again, trying to make it accessible to everyone. Not everyone has the time to kind of read through a full report. So there'll be ways to consolidate some of that information for easy consumption. And going forward, I think there are some recommendations to look at this plan on a biannual basis. So that could be something that we partner with on WEAC and different organizations and boards and committees in the town.
Hi, I'm the chair of WEAC currently, and I would just say that I think this idea of public education and disseminating information is what we always come up against. We always know that's sort of where the rubber hits the road. We know what the message is. We know what we have to tell people. The question is, how do we get people to hear the message? Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. And WEAC often gets asked to be, could you help us spread the word? And we do what we can, but we're a board of 9 members. So I would say for something this important, this has to be like an all hands on deck kind of communication campaign, like all departments of the town. It has to come from up on high too, I think, not just sort of the grassroots effort. I mean, look how many people are in this room. There are not nearly enough people here right now. Not anywhere, and you only had 100 respondents on that survey? I mean, I'm not trying to be a downer, I'm just saying, yes, we need to get the word out, but it's going to require everyone at all levels of the town to do that.
That is for certain. And, you know, with this project kind of coming from the 2020 comprehensive plan, we are going to be working on ways to, as I had mentioned, on a more annual or biannual or even more often basis to make sure that it is something that all different facets, departments of the town are considering, even in the way that they move forward in their policies, incorporating sustainable, clean energy factors into their daily operations.
Thanks. First off, I want to say this looks amazing. Well done. Very inclusive of a lot of different topics. I have two questions. Regarding storm resilience, has there been any move to bury power lines? I know it's expensive and it would take a while and you'd have to get utilities and cable and phone to cooperate at the same time, but that might help with future storms. And then second, is there a way to increase MBTA access, to pull out bus lines farther, to add bus routes, to make the trains come on a more frequent schedule?
So in regards to the MBTA and public access, that is definitely something that we've been actively pursuing and looking at. There's a potential microtransit project that we may or may not be getting, but we have come together with different communities, surrounding communities, to consider a microtransit option for like that, kind of like that last leg opportunity for folks that are commuting, even those that may work in the general region. And what we think could come up out of that is like using it as a one-year pilot program to then possibly look at fixed bus routes to, add more modes of transportation.
Yeah, and I'll add, it's not just about getting people to use transit, but actually making sure it's accessible. So we're hoping this grant goes through. But also looking at things like if you drive down Islington and you don't know there's a commuter rail station down there, like you don't know. So even something as simple as a sign that says train station that way and parking this way, bike rack that way, like encouraging people very actively in the neighborhoods as they interact to recognize these things are here. I think Jeff is next.
Thanks, Amanda.
Is there any way to get power lines buried, do you know?
I do believe that that is something that's been implemented in the past and possibly continuing going forward, but I guess.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the WEAC folks because I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. We have a denominator. I want to see what the new numerator is going to be after we get these labels onto the recycling bins to see how big a difference that makes.
You want to help us hop on?
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. I'm excited about it because it's a small step, but it could speak volumes when we see the numbers. Thank you.
And to circle back to the underground for power lines utilities.
Yeah, I could just say just a word about that. Over 20 years, almost 30 years ago, we put the power lines underground on Washington Street, and about 25 years we did on High Street. In both of those cases, it was maybe about a mile or less of power lines, and it cost tens of millions of dollars that were then parceled out over everyone's electric bill. So there's always a possibility of doing that, working with Eversource to get it done, but it is extremely expensive, and it would be a very long payback. So it would be difficult to do large sections of the town, but we could tackle individual areas, see what's the next place on the agenda, and we could look into that. But it would be the whole town that would pick up the bill for it.
Thanks. This is awesome developments, and I love the momentum we're building together. I'm curious how much of the school has been involved, the school district being a big stakeholder, and waste management and recycling, composting. have all been hot topics for the past couple of years, at least while I've been in town. And I guess the secondary question is in terms of marginal abatement costs. So there are all these great projects, but the ones that pay back the quickest and have the most incentives available through Inflation Reduction Act seem to be the lowest hanging fruit. So how do we do both? Collaborate with the schools and go after the lowest hanging fruit?
So yeah, I guess for the first part with the schools, I think that's an active conversation that I've been trying to have with them. In actually drafting the plan and capacity, sometimes it doesn't get there, but we are trying to work out at least engaging the youth in terms of reactivating another survey to see what the students are thinking. But yeah, there's definitely room for more engagement on that end. And then, yeah, there are definitely some low-hanging fruit. In terms of policy, those are always easier things that are, programmatic things that departments can start thinking about in a climate lens, so that doesn't really cost as much. But when we're thinking about active projects such as, underground utilities or even the microgrids, obviously those are like the big things that we'd like to consider at some point. But for sure, at some point, looking at some type of financial analysis might be a next step to it.
Thanks, Anil. At one of the visioning sessions, it was the issue of gas-powered landscaping equipment came up, and there was some discussion of, potentially having some kind of permitting process for the landscapers and encouraging them, maybe through a variable permit fee, to transition to electric equipment. I don't see that on this plan, though.
Yes.
Is that something that's on the radar still?
Yes, so it's still on the radar. I incorporated some of that into a sub-step of Section 3, C3, that there were various bylaws that are out there in different communities. The ones that I had looked at were
Lexington.
And I think there was Brighton, I believe. Lexington's was a little more, I think, in line with what Westwood, not only community, but the departments may want to consider going forward. I think one of the things with the difference between the communities was in terms of actually regulating those and enforcing those, making sure that we don't put too much of a burden on specific departments, but that is in the plan. There's a whole looking into it.
I just want to continue a shout out on shuttle bus service, because I noticed you said in there, you had a hope of reviving bus service up and down Route 109, and I can tell you that's not going to happen. I've spoken with the MBTA about it, and with their better bus design, they already have everything worked out, and they don't feel there's any demand along the Route 109 corridor. So, but
If there's no bus, then there can be they can't evaluate demand.
yeah, there's always, build it and they will come, which they don't always think about, but they supposedly do. But in the whole bus network now that the MBTA is trying to revise is to concentrate on main routes, and there are some towns where they used to have, where they had two routes in parallel, and similar to what Westwood has here, and they were consolidating into one route, and immediately people said, well, I live on this one, but how do I get to that one for my doctor's appointment? And of course, no one said it, but the answer is shuttle bus service. The buses get you along up and down the main routes, but then to branch out from there, you need on-demand shuttle bus service, which is whether it's something the town does itself or we're talking about in conjunction with other neighboring towns. that's the only way to go. On fixed route service doesn't work. It doesn't get the ridership, and starting out, I've asked this question at conferences. If you have nothing and you want to start a shuttle bus service, the way to go is on demand, not fixed route. And
So to that point, we are looking at on-demand microtransit options. We'll hopefully, that can lead to data that we can collect, seeing what hotspots in town have the most demand, and potentially lead to fixed route. But yeah, definitely on-demand being the first part as a transition to fixed route. And then if that fixed route were to work, then petitioning MBTA to consider, joining in the process.
You're on your own here.
So, I don't think we said it, I know we explained it a little more fully at a planning board meeting one night, but so the grant that we mentioned before is for a on-demand shuttle service. So it would cover, it's in partnership with Dedham, Norwood, Canton, and Westwood took the lead on the application. We're still waiting on whether we get it, so that's where all this is hanging in the balance. But it's run by a company who does the shuttle for Salem and I think Newton, so it's turnkey if we get it. And it's going to cover, we made sure High Street was a priority area, and then also, like Elijah was saying before, like getting from the house to the commuter rail station, or we got letters of support from the MBTA, from various town services, from housing developers. So we're really hoping that this goes through, but money.
Yeah. All right.
What about bike infrastructure?
That is a consideration as well. We did ask in the survey what the level of activity is with that, and some concerns were the actual infrastructure in the town accommodating for bikes and walking. So that is a very good point. So yes, that is considered in the plan. All right, I think that we can conclude there for the night. Just wanted to let folks know again that we will be posting this relatively in the short future. I will be sending updates, and then we'll also make a physical copy available at our office for folks to review. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and yeah, thank you again.